What about Montenegro during the Second World War? The country is part of the larger kingdom of Yugoslavia, which got overrun by the Axis powers in April 1941. Now, did you know that some historians argue that the very first large uprising against the Axis powers occurred here in Montenegro? This here is another Countries in World War II episode, Montenegro during the Second World War. Good to have you back on the channel. If you're new, I'm Stevan. I'm a Dutch history teacher. I like to cover history on location. Like right now, I'm on a hill overlooking the Montenegrin capital, Podgorica, and having a beautiful view. And if you find these on location videos interesting, well, consider subscribing and also hit that notification bell. If you want to support me so I can make more trips like this, feel free to support me via PayPal or via Patreon. The links are in the description. During the First World War, Montenegro sided with Serbia and was swiftly overrun by the Austro-Hungarians in 1916. In 1918, the country was liberated by the Entente. The in 1917 signed Corfu Declaration foreshadowed the unification of Montenegro with Serbia, which happened in December 1918. The new state would become part of the new kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes, later Yugoslavia. This led to the Christmas uprising the following year, where Montenegrin Whites fought against Montenegrin Greens. The Whites were Unionists who advocated a centralist Yugoslavia. The Greens supported the house of Pavlowitch Njegoš of Montenegro over the house of Karađorđević of Serbia. They weren't necessarily against a Yugoslav state, but wanted Montenegro to maintain its own identity and not be ruled by Serbs. However, the rebellion was crushed. Insurrection occurred till 1929. On the 25th of March 1941, Yugoslavia signed the Tripartite Pact to join the Axis powers. Hitler wanted to use the country's railway network to capture Greece. Then, on the 27th of March, Serbian military leaders seized power in a military coup in Belgrade, denounced Regent Paul and put the 17-year-old Peter on the throne. Hitler then vowed to destroy Yugoslavia. In April 1941, the Axis invasion of Yugoslavia took place. The kingdom was taken down in 12 days. Yugoslavia was then partitioned. Let's take a look at what happened to Montenegro. It came almost fully under Italian control, but the type of control varied. Parts of eastern Montenegro were annexed into Italian-held Albania. This was due to the many Albanians that populated the region. In the north, an area was added from Serbia. The area around the naval base of Kotor and Split was added to Zadar, which was already in Italian hands, and formed three discontinuous provinces of Kataro, Spalato and Zara, all under the governorate of Dalmatia, part of the Kingdom of Italy. Montenegro, along with Albania and the annexed part of Dalmatia, was a stepping stone into the Central Balkans, and the adjacent Bay of Kotor was to serve as the base for the Italian Navy guarding the southern Adriatic. From an economic point of view, however, Montenegro was a burden from the start. Occupied Montenegro relied on food import, and the extraction and exploitation of minerals was yet to be developed. When the Italians marched in, they were greeted by separatists who formed a committee for the liberation of Montenegro. The Italians were assisted by collaborator Sekula Drljević. As we saw in other Italian administrated regions, initially the Italians were friendly and lenient. However, soon the dissatisfaction arose. There was an influx of 25,000 refugees. Most of them came from Croatia. Montenegro lost territory to other occupiers. There were economic problems, and the Italians actually had reason to worry, because many former Yugoslav army officers came from this region, and on top of all that, the Communist Party of Montenegro was pretty big. The Italians were shocked when, in July 1941, a massive revolt occurred. Reasons for this uprising was that collaborator Sekula Drljević wanted to create an Axis-aligned puppet state. Drljević had organized his Montenegrin separatists, known as the Greens, against Montenegrin Chetniks as well as Partisans. Later served the Croatian Ustaša and administered the Axis-run Belgrade concentration camp at Žajmište. A day after the new state's inauguration, July 13, 1941, both Montenegrin Chetniks and Montenegrin Partisans led a massive uprising against the new state, a demonstration that would catch the attention of both London and Washington. The revolt was crushed, but rebels recovered and resumed their activities near the end of the year. An order of the military governor of January 12, 1941 specified the reprisals. For every Italian officer killed or wounded, 50 civilians would be shot, and for every non-commissioned officer or private killed or wounded, 10 civilians would be shot. And this led to a split in the Yugoslav resistance. The nationalist Serbian-oriented forces, the Chetniks, who were led by Draza Mihailovic, and the communist-oriented forces, the Partisans, who were led by Josef Broz Tito. At some point, Chetnik leader Draza Mihailovic came to the conclusion that the communist partisans were the main enemy and not the Axis forces. And what we see happen then is that Chetnik forces started to collaborate with the Italian occupiers to destroy the partisans. The Italians wanted to use the Chetniks for law and order. The Chetniks wanted to use the Italians to crush the partisans. Now, initially this was fairly successful, which also had to do with some military mistakes of the partisans. The partisans then commenced on a reign of terror in Serbia, Bosnia and Montenegro. This is known as the leftist errors or the Red Terror. Now I can dedicate a whole standalone episode on this topic. There were different military factions. The Greens, the Separatists, Muslims and Albanians who united themselves in the Bali Combater. The challenge of discussing Yugoslav countries during World War II is not only that its borders were messed up, like I said, what is now Montenegro was back then either occupied by Italy, annexed by Italy or incorporated into Italian-held Albania, but also that events like operations of the partisans, the Chetniks, collaboration was going on in other Yugoslav countries as well, or started in one country and continued in the other. So it's hard to get the full picture of everything when I talk about a specific Yugoslav country in World War II. And also the topic of the Chetniks is immensely complicated. And if that's not complicated enough, even among Italians there were tensions, as Pavlowitch wrote. Rivalry between the Cetinje Italians and the Tirana Italians was almost as bad as between Chetniks and communists. When Italy surrendered in April 1943, most Italians were relieved and hoped to go home. What happened with the Italian soldiers outside Italy at that point deserves an episode of its own. Main reason is that unified Italian command had ceased to exist, and therefore every unit was left to its own devices. Most Italians were taken prisoner by the Germans. Most of their weaponry went to Tito's soldiers. By the 20th of September, the Germans were in control of the coast of Cetinje. They left one division there to maintain order. Since food wasn't coming in from Italy any longer, the Montenegrin population soon faced starvation. To facilitate their rule in Montenegro, the Germans followed the Italian practice of securing the cooperation of the separatists, who were well disposed towards Nedić, Serbian collaborator, but not towards Mihailovic in Serbia, and even of representatives of the Zanjak Muslims. The Germans tried to use the local gendarmerie and militia and the remainder of some Chetnik units to help control Montenegro. From what I understood, Montenegro had a small Jewish population, 330, if I include the northern Zanjak region, which was largely included in Axis-controlled Montenegro, which increased due to the refugees from the NDH and Serbia to over 800, including Kosovo. When the Germans took over Montenegro, these Jews were deported to Croatian or German death camps to meet their fate. German rule in Montenegro lasted until early December 1944, when the last occupation forces departed in the general German withdrawal from the Balkans through Bosnia towards the Austrian border. This city, Podgorica, was renamed to Titograd, and in 2006, after a referendum, Montenegro and Serbia separated, and ever since Montenegro has become an independent state. Shout out to my patrons, you see their names on the screen, and if you like to learn about other countries during the Second World War, you can click right here, and I have one for you right here about Croatia during World War II. I want to thank you for watching. Best wishes from Podgorica, Montenegro.